Putin's invasion of Ukraine has cost him most of his military equipment. Sources say Russia has lost over 2,000 tanks since the war in Ukraine began. And that's just the ones the public knows about.
Well, after more than 2 years of war in Ukraine, speculation is rife on how much military hardware Russia still has at its disposal. Open source investigators Oryx say more than 2,500 Russian tanks have been lost since the beginning of the conflict.
Does Putin have what it takes to sustain this war? And just how many other military equipments has Russia lost? According to data analyzed by the Oryx project, in October 2024 alone, Russian military hardware witnessed a dramatic spike in losses, with 695 units damaged or destroyed. This includes 253 infantry fighting vehicles, 103 tanks, 41 armored personnel carriers, 4 aircrafts, and 1 Mi-28 helicopter. In September, Russia lost 547 units. In August and July, the total loss was recorded at 434 and 548 units, respectively. Although Ukraine has also suffered its own share of equipment losses, it is nothing compared to Russia's. In October, Ukraine only lost 276 units. This includes 47 armored personnel carriers, 28 infantry fighting vehicles, 21 tanks, and 1 Su-24M aircraft. According to an article published by Forbes magazine, the increase in Russia's equipment losses is due to the high pace of the Russian army's offensive attack in Ukraine. And there's some truth to this. In August, Ukraine suffered more losses than Russia. The country lost 434 units, but this was due to the fact that Ukraine was on the offensive. It was in August that Ukraine invaded Kursk, a region in Russia. But now that Ukraine is more on the defensive, they have recorded less losses than Russia. And due to the United States' anti-tank weapons, strategic positioning, and effective air defense systems, Ukraine has been able to inflict heavy damage on Russia's advancing forces. A good example of this equipment are the Javelin anti-tank missiles and NLAW systems. These US-supplied tools have allowed Ukraine to rain missiles on Russia's tanks from a far distance, while minimizing their losses. As noted by a Forbes article, the Kremlin appears willing to trade equipment and personnel for marginal territorial gains. However, this approach comes at a very high cost, and it was most evident in their face-off with Ukraine in the village of Ayinka, north of Ugledar. In this battle, Russia lost 206 units of equipment compared to Ukraine's 55. According to analysts, Russia's full-force attack is unsustainable, and there are predictions that Russia might suffer equipment shortages in the coming year. The increased operational strain is already visible in the heavy losses sustained by Russian units like the BMP-3 and BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, as well as MTLB armored personnel carriers, which have been heavily targeted by Ukrainian defenders. And these recent losses can be compared to those experienced by Russian forces during their retreat from Kharkiv in 2022, leaving behind over 1,032 units of military equipment. Among the discarded weapons were high-value assets like the Tor M1, the OSA anti-aircraft systems, and 1 L-269 Zoopark 1M radar systems. In recent months, Russia has also seen a decrease in their reserves and manufacturing capabilities, leading them to license the production of their military equipment to other countries. A recent example was when Putin licensed the production of the Russian Su-35 jets to Iran. Russia has also received many critiques about the war, as some believe Russia does not have what it takes to maintain the pace and effectiveness of its operations. From October 28 to November 3rd, Russian forces captured 172 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, with the previous week seeing a gain of 196 square kilometers. However, these advances have come at an immense cost in terms of equipment and personnel, and Russia's ability to sustain the siege has been questioned. But military equipment is not the only thing Russia has lost. The amount of Russian soldiers that have been killed and wounded in the war against Ukraine will leave you shocked. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought the country would fall in a matter of days. But one thing Putin could not have predicted was the amount of support Ukraine would get from the West. This support has played a major role in the clear contrast between the massive loss of Russian military personnel to Ukraine's losses. Reports estimate that Russian military casualties have reached close to 300,000, with as many as 120,000 soldiers dead and around 180,000 wounded.
Russian casualties since the start of the war in Ukraine now stand at 316,760, according to the Ukrainian military.
Despite a larger population base to pull from, Russia's casualty rate has remained high, partly due to its military tactics and a lack of rapid medical care for its injured soldiers. On the other hand, estimates place Ukrainian casualties at nearly 70,000 deaths and between 100,000 to 120,000 wounded. Though lower than Russia's, these numbers are also devastating for a smaller country with a more limited population. But now, it's being estimated that Russia will lose about 40,000 troops this month, if proper measures are not taken.
Russia's losses are quite high, and this month seems to be one of the largest in terms of losses for Russia. We estimate that the enemy will lose about 40,000 troops, both wounded and killed, during the month, Kesselman said.
Russia has also suffered economic repercussions of this war. The West has laid heavy sanctions on Russia, putting a strain on Putin's economy. The Russian ruble has massively devalued, as well as the cost of essential goods. Key industries, such as the energy exports, have also faced declining revenues. And now many have been questioning how long Putin will carry out this war before his economy completely shuts down.
The war is still raging. The Russian economy is growing. It looks like sanctions have been a failure.
No, not at all. So he's turbocharged government spending to fuel the war machine. He's frozen infrastructure and education spending. And yes, that's lifted GDP growth, but there's a cost. Sky-high inflation, almost 9%. Nosebleed interest rates, almost 19%. Both are choking off growth.
Although Putin may have lost most of his military equipment and soldiers in the war against Ukraine. However, Putin recently signed a deal with another leader that might help him in this war. So check out this deep dive, where I'll show you why Putin gifts fighter jets to Iran.